Here we go. It's another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Gold. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And our mission, our intention is to bring you the real news each and every week. And we do that multiple times during the week. We release a ton of content that includes in-depth news coverage as told by not only our field messengers, but then our news team breaks down some stories you may or may not see the headlines of in everyday news, but we try to give you the story behind the headlines. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating what we call the new Earth. And we also have updates from the GIA, the Global Intelligence Agency, and that's with Kimberly Gogan, who is the head of the GIA. And if you really want to know what's going on our planet at this time with the deep state, with AI systems, and for the control over humanity, I highly recommend you watch the GIA report, which typically comes out a few times a week. What you're listening to right now is a podcast that breaks down and highlights the content that we have released over the last week, because we do not rely on advertising. You can kind of get into trouble when you do that. I've worked for various news organizations, and it is a very fine line between the influence that advertisers have over content. So we don't do that. We are focused on memberships, which mean our members get access to all of our content first. And then we do publish our reports on YouTube and Rumble a week later. But to be honest, we don't have a lot of control over what stays up, right? There's a lot of censorship up there. There's a lot of shadow banning going on. And so even if you are subscribed to us, sometimes you might not see the content. You have to be very intentional if you want to see our content and not be a member. So if you want more information about what it is to be a member and cost and stuff like that, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. But this podcast is free, and I release it once a week. And the whole idea is if you missed anything or you just want a quick recap, we put out a ton of stuff. So maybe you missed one of the news updates, maybe you missed a GIA report, and I'm hoping what this is a good way for you guys to get caught up. Also, if you would like to share UNN, this is a great way to do that. And so you can share these podcast episodes. They're actually free on our website. If you want to grab the kind of video version, it's really more of a picture of me with some wavelengths, some audio going across it, but you can share that. This podcast is also available wherever you get podcasts. So either way is great. And with all of the content we put out there, I encourage you guys to always think critically about the information. You should always do your own research. Yeah, they try to hide some stuff from us, and they're pretty good at doing that on social media, but they can't hide everything. And one of the things that we're learning about now is these control systems that they've had over us for so long are going away, and it is revealing a stronger connection, the potential at least of a stronger connection between you and source. So I say source, you can say God, you can say the creator of the universe, but a positive being, entity, let's call it, that runs on love. And if you want to tap into that, which gives you really the keys to everything and what you need, then it's becoming easier and easier to do that. And one of the things we talk about in specifically the GIA reports is how that connection is building and how those control structures are crumbling. And we've got some good sound bites for you more towards the end of this podcast episode about that. All right. Any announcements that we want to get to before we kind of dive into our news stories? This was a very interesting week for us as a news team. And that's because we had a real breakthrough. And it wasn't just a breakthrough with, I got a scoop on a story. It was an energetic breakthrough is the best way that I can describe it. And for me, it was very palpable. It was very easy to feel, to sense as we were kind of going through it. So I want to share that with you guys today. What happened was one of our field messengers sent a story idea specifically to me because I live in the San Diego area, and this was a story about a naturopathic doctor being sentenced in the San Diego courtroom for practicing, and giving holistic advice to his clients. Okay. So he had already gone through the court system. His sentencing was coming up. He was found guilty. By the way, his name's Dr. Young, if you didn't see the report this week. And I went out there and I covered the story, and I can't quite explain what happened, but I could feel as I was doing the story that we had a huge, like I said, energetic breakthrough with this. And it took the whole news team to put the story together. We actually got it up there the same day that the sentencing occurred, just, a handful of hours after it happened. And there's something there. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, UNN is changing the face of news. And whatever we did this week as a team, starting from an idea from a field messenger, and, I happened to be the person that was local that went out on this story, but everybody had their hand in this. And we're still working on this story because we're promoting it. And I actually have an interview coming up with Dr. Young from jail. And so it's still very much alive, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with UNN moving forward, like very soon, because I can tell you that something is different, and we have just opened some major, major energetic doors, and I can't wait to see what that looks like. I just wanted to share that with you because it was a really, really special week for that. Okay, now let's get to all the other stories that we covered besides the story with Dr. Young. So here are the stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Let's kick things off with our incredible field messengers who not only give the news team story ideas, but actually go out there and just report on what is happening in their community. Maybe that's part of what's going to happen. Maybe this breakthrough that I was talking about is to enable more people to go out and do this and limit any powers that were from stopping you in doing this. I'm telling you, something energetically happened. I'm excited to see how this unfolds. So for our field messengers, this is how we change the face of news, right? We have people that just report on what's going on in their community. And this is what our field messengers do. If you would like more information about this, and maybe you want to become a field messenger or just kind of learn a little bit more about it to see if you want to be involved, we do have a Telegram group where our producers are in there and they're helping people with their stories. And by the way, if you go out and record something for our field messenger report, you don't have to put it together. We have a whole team of people, a production team that will help you with that. So you do have support with this. We also have meetings, and I believe it's every week we've got meetings. All that information is in the Telegram group. And if you want more information on this, you can go to our website and learn more about it because we're here to support you guys. Let's talk about the reports that were released this week. So we kick things off with Emma. Emma is out of Spain, and she takes us to the biological station in Fuerteventura, Spain. They focus on restoring native plants and wildlife, and they do this through research, conservation, and education. So I believe this was the first time Emma had been there, and she said she was pleasantly surprised that they are really focused on the restoration of our planet. She showed us this area where they have all these different types of plants, and there was a lot of education behind it. I think she was one of the first tours because they primarily cater to students, but now they've opened it up to the public. They've actually been around since the 1960s, I think she said. But now they're starting to educate everyday people about that, which is beautiful. And Emma was able to kind of capture some of that and show it to us. All right, Diane out of Uganda takes us to the city of Jinja City in Uganda. And she spoke with the deputy city commissioner about his role, how he supports his community. We learned all about what he does, really. in his office. I think it was right in his office where Diane recorded the interview. What's nice about this is, we kind of get a glimpse into how other governments are run, which is certainly not something that mainstream or most alternative media outlets are going to tell us. One of the things we've been talking about a lot in the GIA reports is how national governments are in the process of collapsing. That's not a bad thing. And it's not something I believe that we should be concerned about. We still have our local governments, and many of us have state governments as well. So this particular person is connected to the president of Uganda. It's like an office that's connected to the presidency. And according to Diane's interview, they basically ensure the security of the area, and that can look like a lot of different things. They help with budgets and funding, make sure those obligations are met. They may oversee building construction of schools. And he said not just government projects, also non-governmental projects. They also serve as a mediator in certain cases. So again, interesting to see how other governments function. We don't really have something like this that I'm aware of in the U.S. unless you want to say, oh, that's kind of like if we've got local representatives that represent us in Congress, but it's still different, right? This person isn't part of their Congress per se. This is just someone that's in the communities. I would love to know how the community feels about this person because it could be viewed as Big Brother watching over you. But if the intention is pure and you really do have the support of your government, then at least for the time being, while we have governments, maybe that could be a good thing. But it's kind of interesting. Like I said, we're just getting to know each other again, guys, and learning more about our different countries and how things work to determine how do we move forward. What is the best way to move forward with humanity? Okay, Helen out of Australia. Well, she talks about her perennial food trees. So these are bushes, trees. A lot of times they were like baby trees in this video, but they're perennials, which means they come back, maybe not every year, but it's not just an annual, right? So every couple years, they may come back. And so it's really important to protect them. And she's in Australia, so she was talking about the various animals that love to come eat her perennials. Kangaroos being one of them, guys. It's a real thing. As well as, what'd you say, llamas? Or maybe she said alpacas. I love alpacas, by the way. Other animals, I'm sure, right? I'm originally from the Midwestern portion of the United States. So we would have deer. We would have deer come and eat, bushes and trees and plants and all that good stuff. So anyway, she basically gives us her breakdown of how she protects her perennials. She talks about the netting that she has over it. She actually uses this poisonous plant. It's like a branch and it kind of looked dried out, but she does put it kind of at the top where you would gather the netting. And that's another way to kind of prevent animals. They can smell that, right? They don't actually get hurt by it, but they can smell it or whatever. And then they're very standoffish because they know that it's poisonous. The string that she uses, the timber she puts at the bottom to prevent rabbits and things like that from getting under it. So if you want a good breakdown of how to protect your perennials, because I think Helen said she either has 300 versions of perennials on her property or she's aiming to have that many. So she's definitely got some good experience there. All right, Amy out of New Jersey talks about how she prevents parasites. And Amy, you are speaking my language. This is something that I discovered, I would say maybe 6 months or so ago. I may have heard of parasites before, but I didn't really realize how impacted we are by it. So I've been on a parasite cleansing program, an ongoing one for the last 6 months. And in this story, Amy shares what protocol works for her because what works for one person may not work for another. So there's lots of different ways to remove parasites. And she goes through the whole process of cleansing from them. There's some supplements she uses. Also, she talks about natural foods that can aid in reducing parasites. In this particular report, we don't have a lot of images of these parasites, which is probably a good thing, but if you search for it online, you're going to see some really nasty stuff. And just think about that being in your body. And I can probably clock with an egg timer how quickly you're going to be on a parasite protocol. All right. Helene out of Belgium. This was really interesting. She took us to a chateau in Belgium because they have this special water purification system that seems kind of simple, actually. But she interviewed the person that kind of runs it. I don't know if he actually created it, but he could kind of give us a breakdown of how the whole process works. And it works by removing chemicals from the water. And he actually called it wastewater. So I'm not sure his definition of wastewater, but usually when you're removing chemicals from water, you're using some sort of filter. But the problem, he explained, was the filter then has a lot of nasty stuff in it, and what are you going to do with that? So you're not really completely eliminating waste. You're just taking it out temporarily. But what's going to happen after? Where's that stuff going to go? It's not good stuff. So this system actually removes all the chemicals without filters, which is pretty special, right? I love all this technology that we're learning about that can do all this incredible stuff. Things that have been hidden from us and for a very long time. All right, Tara out of Washington, which is a state in the United States. So we're talking about the state, not Washington, D.C., talks about deforestation in her area. She said there are some practices going on. She's in the Shelton area of Washington that are harming the environment. She shows video of large areas of trees. This is on private property. But she shows how these trees are being cut down. And not only are the trees cut down, and that's sad in itself, but what they do to the land afterward, which is a lot of burning, a lot of toxic herbicides to kill the vegetation. I'm not really sure why they're doing that, but it's not just taking down trees. This is what's happening to the topsoil. Because we have to start looking at things more holistically, right? It's not just about chopping down a tree or solving whatever problem you're trying to solve. It's about how it affects the entire area, how it affects the ecosystem after you've done whatever you've done. So really, Tara was just bringing some awareness to this because we definitely have to fix this moving forward. All right, Grace out of Belgium takes us to Brussels. She pronounced it a little bit differently, though. I'm like, that's not how I pronounce Brussels. Anyways, this is the capital of Belgium. It's one of Europe's most vibrant cities. The architecture, you guys, if you've never been, is stunning. I can't really tell you about this report and do it justice. This is one of those things you have to see the video. Of course, it has a very rich cultural heritage. And one of the things that I thought when I was looking at these buildings is they almost look Tartarian. And if you don't know what that means, look it up because our buildings today are just so simple. They are so overly simplified in their construction. There's very rarely any beauty in anything. And so this just felt like you were like kind of taking a step back in time and really appreciating architecture for the beauty of it. And I'm sure there's a lot of use you can get out of those buildings, not just to look pretty. I'm just saying free energy, and there's a lot of other things, a lot of other reasons why they used to design buildings the way they did. All right, Mary Lou out of Australia takes us to Uluru. And Uluru used to be called Ayers Rock. And I actually went to Australia. I think this was the summer after I graduated high school and I was going into college. My parents were going to Australia and I went with them. And I actually climbed Ayers Rock, which is now Uluru, by the way. And I think it was always really Uluru. And then I think they named it Ayers Rock and then it got transformed back. It's actually a very spiritual site, which I don't believe they ever told us many, many years ago when I was there. This is a huge rock with caves, and the whole area, is very energetically, there's something very special about it. Now, if you would have told 18, 19-year-old Sunny at the time that was going on, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I'm a much different person than I was when I climbed the rock. But it's beautiful. It's considered a sacred site, and people go and just marvel at the beauty of it. And so we got to see a lot of really beautiful images from Uluru. And finally, Tim out of Canada. He's actually in Vancouver, Canada for this report. And he noticed a really big gap between those people who are struggling in the area and the rest of the population. You know, one of the things that he talked about is the property value in Vancouver, Canada has doubled within the last year. And British Columbia spends, he said, $360 million a year on social services. But where is that money going? He said there's about 8,000 people that are living homeless right now. And yes, some people choose to be homeless, but where's all that money? Where's the $360 million going? That could do a lot of good. I don't know that there would be a lot of people living homeless, at least in, and you have to see the video, but in tents and things like that, if they, if that money was actually going to support them. So it's just raising some questions. What's going on here? Because there is a huge discrepancy between those who have and those who have not. All right, let's talk about some of the news stories that the team and I worked on for you guys for this week. I already mentioned the sentencing for Dr. Young and the fact we're going to have more coverage coming up this week, the interview with him from inside jail. Some of the other stories. All right, let's talk a little bit about childhood obesity. This is on the rise globally, and school lunches play a crucial role in either contributing to or combating the issue. Countries like Spain, Mexico, Japan, Finland, South Korea, and France are taking action to improve school meals and promote healthier eating habits among students. Spain, for example, is enforcing new rules to ban junk food and serve more local, nutritious options in schools, especially for low-income families. Mexico has implemented a junk food ban, while Japan focuses on fresh, balanced meals that also teach manners. So let's learn a little bit more from Japan.
Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world, but not just that, they have the healthiest lifespan in the world. So the average British person is in poor health 16 years before they die. In Japan, it's like a few years. Japan is the third richest country in the world, and they have almost no obesity at all. 42.5% of Americans are obese. It is 4% of people in Japan. There's almost no childhood obesity in Japan. I went to a school in Tokyo, typical middle-class school. It's the weirdest thing, walking around a school with 1,000 children, and there being not one overweight child anywhere. How did Japan do it? Ozempic has been approved in Japan, and there ain't any sales.
So Japan's on the right track. Finland provides free nutritious lunches to all students. South Korea emphasizes minimally processed filling meals. And France offers structured dietitian-approved 4-course lunches. Wow, must be nice. To teach both nutrition and culture. These global efforts highlight how school lunches can be a powerful tool in supporting children's health and development. Performance-based layoffs are becoming more common, especially in tech companies like Meta and Microsoft, where they're often used to quietly remove low performers, like avoiding the stigma or legal requirements tied to traditional firings. A 2024 survey revealed many companies admit these layoffs aren't about cutting costs, but rather sidestepping difficult conversations. And other reasons too. Take a listen.
There are different ways companies use to lay people off, especially in today's world. One is forcing people back in the office full time, knowing that they do not want to do that or can't because they already relocated, and then laying them off as a result. The other one is a performance improvement plan showing that an employee is just not productive enough or not delivering the results that's expected of them, and then using that score, typically 1 to 5, 1, 2, and 3, typically being the people who get, laid off, to remove them from the company. And so don't get excited about performance improvement plans, because it can really backfire and hurt your career, because it can be used against you instead of actually help you get ahead at work.
Experts warn these tactics can create confusion, lower morale, and risk legal consequences, particularly when it impacts workers returning from leave or when performance standards aren't clearly defined. While some argue it's about efficiency, others see it as a cover for deeper issues like poor management. At the same time, companies are shifting hiring strategies to focus more on AI and machine learning roles, signaling a broader transformation in the workforce. New World Screwworm. I know it sounds crazy, right? Didn't really know it was a thing until we did the story. Well, guess what? It's a flesh-eating parasite once eradicated from the U.S. in 1966, but it is making a dangerous return just south of the border, prompting swift action from the USDA. Known for its larvae that bury into living flesh, sounds like a horror movie, this pest poses serious threats to livestock and, in rare cases, humans. Historically, the U.S. controlled the spread by releasing sterilized flies and creating a protective barrier in Panama, dubbed the Great American Worm Wall. But with new outbreaks reported in southern Mexico and the parasite inching closer to the U.S., well, that's when the USDA stepped in. They have paused imports of live animals from Mexico as of May 11th.
These deadly flies lay eggs in open wounds, and once that larva does hatch, it attacks living flesh. It's extremely deadly for livestock, but could also infect pets, wildlife, and in some rare cases, even humans. Now, the good news is that U.S. hasn't had a widespread outbreak in decades, but stopping it now is key for the administration. That's why, effective immediately, the USDA is suspending live cattle, horse, and bison imports through all southern ports of entry. Customs and Border Protection is working alongside USDA's Animal Health Division to enforce that freeze.
The screwworm's rapid spread and economic impact, once costing U.S. farmers $100 million annually, make containment efforts urgent, as experts warn the risk to agriculture and the public health is very real. Microplastics are no longer just an environmental concern. They are showing up in our bodies. We've talked about this before. And by the way, when I say bodies, that includes our brains, raising serious health alarms. Once considered harmless, plastics are now linked to memory loss, hormone disruption, and immune issues, as new research detects rising levels of micro and nanoplastics in human tissue.
You can actually find plastic in the brain. In fact, you can take a kitchen scale and measure two human brains, and you know which one's got more plastic and it's heavier. You can measure it. And we found plastic in the blood circulation. We never looked at it before, but in a vial blood in a doctor's office, if you look for it, you can actually find plastic circulating in it. And we've actually found plastic in human testicles. We found it in human semen. Don't ask me how it gets down there. And it's also found by urologists who are actually doing surgery. They've actually found it in the flesh of the penis, embedded in there, probably from years and years and years of being exposed to plastic.
Everyday exposures from air, water, food, and even chewing gum. That surprised me. Mean we're ingesting thousands of plastic particles annually. Some countries and cities are cracking down with bans on single-use plastics, while scientists explore safer materials and filtration methods. Though going plastic-free isn't always realistic, at least not yet, experts say small lifestyle changes and supporting your body's natural detox systems can help reduce the risks. China's youth faces a tough job market as economic struggles, a property crisis, and weak demand have left many highly educated graduates working in low-skilled jobs. With youth unemployment reaching record highs, more young people are turning to the civil service for job security. At the same time, vocational education, which trains more than 70% of workers in key industries, is often undervalued and underfunded, leaving students with outdated skills. While demand for skilled workers in manufacturing, IT, and healthcare is growing, the stigma around vocational paths and the mismatch, say that 5 times fast, mismatch between training and industry needs remain major challenges. To address this, China is promoting skilled trades and investing in vocational education to prepare students for a changing economy. Whew, got through it, guys. I did it. Wine fraud is a growing global issue affecting collectors and casual drinkers alike, with scammers using tactics like counterfeit labels, fake origins, and adulterated blends to pass off cheap wine as rare high-end vintages. High-profile cases like Rudy Kurniawan's billion-dollar scam have exposed how widespread and profitable the deception can be, especially as demand for prestigious wines rises. Here's a little bit about what to look for from an expert.
My name is Philip Moulin. I'm the Quality and Authentication Manager for Berry Brothers and Rudd. We had a case the other day where a 6-bottle case came in and one label was at a slightly different height to the other labels on the bottle. That instantly raises a red flag for us. And that was a case of wine that was £2,000 a bottle. So we established fairly early on that there was definitely a ringer within that case which somebody had inserted to try and pull a fast one. We check a number of different things. The first thing we look at is the wooden case. So if it says 1989 on the case, does it look like the wood is 30 years old? Does the capsule fit neatly? Are there any nicks or cuts or folds on that capsule? Next, we look at the fabric of the bottle. We look at the punt of the bottle. Certain chateaux will have markings engraved within the punt of the bottle which signify it to be their bottles. And then, most importantly, you start to look at the detail on the label. We have UV torches. This particular label had 2 holograms hidden within the label, which you can only see under a certain light. And if it was missing those holograms, then we know we have a potential problem again.
While countries like France and Italy enforce strict regulations, the industry is also adopting advanced technology. And he started to mention that in this clip, such as tamper-evident seals, chemical fingerprinting, and blockchain tracking to fight back. As awareness grows, wine fraud is becoming harder to pull off, though it is far from gone. Farming may appear peaceful from the outside, but it often comes with intense stress, isolation, and mental health challenges that are rarely discussed. Farmers face long hours, financial uncertainty, and immense pressure to sustain family traditions, such as owning the land, all while living in rural areas with limited access to mental health support and persistent stigma around seeking help. Though small family farms still make up the majority of these farms, at least in the U.S., many are struggling to stay profitable, adding to emotional strain.
We are humans, too. We are community members, we're volunteers, we're creative, we're problem solvers. There's so much to us. When a family friend of ours passed away to suicide, it was a real eye-opener for us. When we were in line at the visitation, people said, what happened? What was it that caused this? And as a former counselor, I knew that it wasn't one thing. Suicide doesn't start at the end there. There's one thing that causes it. That's not how it works. It's a culmination of things. It starts as stress and it continues as excruciating and chronic stress or depression or anxiety, and it just builds.
Fortunately, countries around the world, from Australia to Canada, well, they're beginning to address this issue, offering tailored mental health programs, peer support networks, and telehealth options to help farmers manage stress and know they're not alone. South Africa is facing a severe water and sanitation crisis fueled by drought, outdated infrastructure, pollution, and widespread corruption. With rainfall far below the global average and more than 40% of piped water lost to leaks or theft, access to safe water is becoming increasingly difficult, especially in rural and underserved communities. Failing sewage systems are contaminating rivers and water supplies, posing major health risks and disrupting daily life and local economies.
Thousands of liters of untreated sewage per second coming from a municipal pipe up there. This is not a river. It comes from a big municipal pipe. It's a storm drain that has been repurposed to dump untreated sewage water. It's literally 500 meters up from the Percy Stewart treatment works. the treatment plant is dumping untreated, heavily polluted water into the Blowhard-Spruit River.
Corrupt officials and criminal syndicates are exploiting the crisis by profiting off private water tanker contracts, sometimes even sabotaging infrastructure to keep demand high. Meanwhile, power shortages from the national electricity crisis are compounding the issue, disrupting water treatment and delivery. The result is a worsening cycle of mismanagement, exploitation, and growing public frustration. And our final story is out of Indonesia. They are experiencing a nickel boom, and it's fueling the world's battery revolution, the electronic battery, e-batteries, and pumping money into the economy. However, it is shredding rainforests, polluting rivers, and uprooting indigenous communities in the process.
While essential for economic growth and the global transition to clean energy, has, though, inflicted significant environmental and social harm. Mining nickel involves clearing vast swathes of forest and excavating the land to create open pits. Without the stabilizing effect of trees and their root systems, however, heavy rainfall can easily trigger erosion and landslides.
Massive areas of jungle are cleared for these mines, twice the deforestation rate of surrounding areas, while runoff and waste/fish stocks and contaminate water on islands that are legally supposed to be off limits to mining. Local villagers see little of this wealth. Many are forced off their land with very little compensation. They lose traditional fishing and farming livelihoods, and they watch higher-paying jobs go to outsiders. As companies push deeper in search of ore, activists and residents are demanding tougher enforcement and real protections before Indonesia's ecological and cultural treasures are mined away for good. Now let's talk about some of the highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency reports. There's a lot going on. Kim had 2 reports that came out this week. So one came out, I believe it was early Tuesday morning. So usually the reports are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But as things intensify and as we're nearing this huge battle that we've been in, not really with the deep state, but with a lot of technology that's been left behind, not for our good, that the deep state wants to gain access to. But our whole goal, and Kim started to talk about this a little bit last week, is to move out of this simulation that we've been in, this matrix that we've been in, into what's called the now. Now, this is kind of hard for us to wrap our head around because we haven't been told about this before. We think in terms of the past, the present, the future, and a lot of times we think the now is the present. But in an artificial world, it's not. And Source, God, the creator of the universe, exists in the now. And if you're not in the now, it can be harder to get that connection with Source, which is why a lot of people are like, I don't feel that connection, right? And so if we move out of this artificial system, then we're going to have a much stronger connection to our creator, which is very exciting, which is when things like manifestation happen perhaps even instantaneously, right? And another key reason to move into the now is then all of their artificial technologies, their AI systems that have been used in the past to control us, that cannot function in the now. So we're exiting this matrix right now, and we're moving into the now. According to Kim Gogan, this has been quite the process, and a lot of things have tried to prevent us from doing this. By the way, the Earth has gotten to this point in the past, but we have never completely gone through. And guys, we are going through this time, and we are going to end up on the other side very, very shortly. So Kim pulled out her whiteboard today and talked about the now. It was kind of tough for me because this is an audio podcast. So I did my best to pick a soundbite where maybe you didn't really need to see everything that was going on screen. But I do recommend that you go back and you listen to, I believe it's Tuesday. We don't usually release on Tuesday, but I believe this was a report that came out on Tuesday. It might say Monday, but technically it came out Tuesday morning, U.S. time. So here's Kim talking about the now.
Now, when you think of the now, you might think of being present in the moment, enjoying what is currently around you, and planning in the now, and thinking only of the now. Somehow, as humans, we're always dragged into the past, the present, and the future. And that is for a reason. You see, because ARTI, as we talked about ARTI, artificial intelligence, ARTI, all alleys and otherwise, could only create in the past, present, and future. It could never distort the now. Just as your soul always was sources, the now has always been sources. The second you stop thinking about the now, which it's almost inevitable for humans on this planet, you start thinking about where you've got to be to work tomorrow and where you've got to go at 2 o'clock today, or where, your savings, you're planning for retirement, you're planning for your future, you're planning on doing things in the future for restoration. Even positive things are still taking you out of the now. That is done on purpose because they cannot manipulate your person in the now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the difference between the now and the past, present, and future, because it's very confusing, and I just wanted to take a few moments to touch on that. Let's bring up the whiteboard real quick. So I'm going to draw this as it is in a straight line, but that's not necessarily the case. Let's call this point the now. Now, the now actually kind of exists throughout the whole area, let's just say, of the omniverse. The now doesn't just exist at a point in quote-unquote time. It is actually the only point where the now can peek through the overlays and holograms and the matrices, as you will. That is the now. So in the past, you'll have many different versions of reality. Those realities are not only time, quote unquote, lines, they are also considered holograms and realities of what you see as the past, present, and future. So these are different subsectors of time as we understand it. And what you would see as the present, because there's an overlay on the now that we call the present. The present is actually, in reality, the past. And it's a constant vicious cycle that we have been living in, not only here on Earth, but throughout the omniverse to some degree. Now, over the course of the last 30 to 45 days in Earth time, most everybody has gotten rid of the past, present, and future and lives in the now. The now is where the golden age lives. The now is where the true Earth exists. And in the future, we have infinite amounts of artificial Earths created by ARTI. We have infinite amounts of artificial humans. We have infinite amounts of artificial planets in our galaxy. We have infinite amounts of artificial suns and moons. We have infinite amounts of constellations that we can see in our sky. And all of these artificial creations happen in the space between the now and 2 minutes in the future. So every 2 minutes, a new reality is created. A new version of you is created. You are being created here and in 2-minute increments, and even in spaces between zeptoseconds, so to speak, in the past, present, and future. This creates confusion sometimes, especially as Artie begins to waver and falter, because you think you did something that you didn't do. You look at the clock and it's midnight and, well, still can't sleep. You toss and turn for a while and you look at the clock again, what feels like 20 minutes later, and it's midnight. It's causing disruptions somewhat in time on this planet as we revert back to the now. Now, as it relates to Earth, the being we know as the demiurge or Yaldabaoth, everybody thinks it's a he. It's not, it's a she. She's no longer with us, but the control mechanism still existed. You actually had holographic, artificial electrons, so to speak, that were mini Earths. Now, there were an infinite number of these cycles, so to speak, not only around Earth, but every planet in this galaxy, which actually created the artificial future, even though it was only a zeptosecond around yourself and around the planet. So this same structure existed around humans too. It existed on every planet in this galaxy, the sun, the moon, and it was constantly reweaving the reality. Every time that one of these fake Earths would pass through the nucleus and onto the other side, it was changing reality. And in the past, in this quote unquote nucleus here in the center, is where Yaldabaoth used to live, or the demiurge. The demiurge was hell-bent on becoming source. And since they couldn't fully control source within you and within the omniverse, the only thing they could do was take that bit of creation, go 2 minutes out, and recreate the creation. So we were almost running on a hamster wheel, because 2 minutes or less before we got to our next step, that reality was being recreated to put a roadblock in front of your face, to make sure that you would never reach out to source, to change all that you had learned every 2 minutes. And within that 2 minutes, there were multiple zeptoseconds that would change as well. It was constantly reweaving like a giant loom, so to speak, the programming of Earth as a keystone, which would then permeate throughout the entire multiverse. Not fully understanding that if we could figure out how to live in the now, which they made it really hard, we could then create our own reality. But it was almost impossible to create our own reality because they would constantly be recreating it. Could they see through the telecommunications satellite system on Earth what you were thinking? Yes. Did the deep state have some access to that? Minor amounts, brainwave technologies, things like that. This would actually catch it when that thought was forming, therefore account for that less than 2 minutes into the future. How dastardly. It's like running on a hamster wheel. You know, when you would go to create things like a business or a cure for a disease or something like that as a human, they would know that you got the wisdom from source because it came from within, where source can reach you, and then it manifested itself into wisdom and then eventually into a thought. They're like, oh, no, this is our dark age. This is our bit of creation. We created disease. Therefore, we're going to rewrite the pathway here. We're going to interfere with other humans' thoughts that might be willing to give you a grant, that might be willing to explore your cure, and all kinds of things. Think about how dastardly it is, forcing us to live in the past, present, and future, not understanding the now. So with these mechanisms, which went absolutely bonkers yesterday, as we were pulling it apart, we're like, ooh, these things started to speed up faster and faster and faster. So it could try to reweave ahead of us. It was almost like a dead man switch. that went off for several hours yesterday. So if you were in the States, that would be around till about 3 o'clock my time, maybe 4. And I don't think even the deep state knew what the heck this mechanism was. The only thing I did was start to convert Earth and humanity and the omniverse to ensure that we could now all live in the now. Because right now, pretty much Earth is left. Maybe this entire galaxy. And that's it. Everybody else is in the now. Everybody else is enjoying the golden age. And by now, it does mean being in the moment. But what that means is when you manifest something in the moment, you have to actually bring it into the reality. So these also create artificial realities, which are a creation of the arties. So artificial realities are created every 2 minutes. Crazy. It was so hard to try to figure this out. And then when this machine started going double time, we were like, oh boy, And then we had the council on it. We had another council that we consulted with that has seen this. And we were all trying to figure out how to dismantle this bomb before it went off yesterday. So, we all worked together. This is not a hierarchical system. This is about figuring out mechanisms of the dark that were put in place so that we could dismantle it without causing severe harm. Because we had unlimited humans living in unlimited realities. You know, that deja vu that you feel sometimes, like you've already done this before? Yeah, well, chances are you might have. And then it's gone 2 minutes later.
Explains a lot of things, right? Why do you feel like you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again and you can't get ahead and you're always falling behind? Like, I believe our soul, our spirit understands this on a very deep level. It just never really reached consciousness for us. It never quite came through, especially as Kim is explaining it now. All right, so that was Tuesday's report. And then on Friday, it was kind of fun. So yesterday we had, Kim did a live GIA report, and that was released. It was on our app. It also went out live on YouTube. And then there was a private Zoom call with our closest 400 plus friends. So I believe this was for our members. So that's another reason. Go to unitednetwork.earth if you want to learn more about membership. And then she brought individual people on. We had a whole team that was organizing this. And you guys could ask whatever questions you wanted to Kim. And that was a lot of fun too. So if you're a member, you can check out that whole thing. If it's not up yet, I'm sure it'll be up on our app very soon. On Fridays, the part of the GIA report, so not the Q&A at the end, she continued talking about our transition out of the matrix. And there's a very interesting section. Again, she pulled out the whiteboard. It was impossible for me to make sense of this in an audio podcast because you really have to see her whiteboard. But she talks about binary coding. So this is the zeros and the ones. If you guys ever saw the Matrix movie, there's a lot of disclosure that actually comes out through movies because they want you to be like, oh, it's just a movie. Well, that's not really true. Because humans have free will, we're beings of free will, and obviously other beings are out there that have free will. This is their way of telling us what they're doing to us, and in their world, us agreeing to it, but we just think it's a movie. But because we didn't do anything to stop it, then, it's like, well, we told the humans, at least they thought that was going to work. That obviously didn't work because Source God, creator of the universe, has stepped in and said no more. We're going into a golden age. But there for a long time, that's what they did. So in the Matrix movie, when you see zeros and ones, you've got, Neo, right? And there's like green numbers, whatever, letters pop up on the screen, and he sees like this whole other world unfolding. Well, if you want to know more about binary coding and what was behind it and all the little crevices and spaces in between, then check out Kim's report on Friday. Again, no way to really go into this and have anything make sense without seeing her whiteboard. So I'm going to skip over that part. You'll have to check it out yourself. But I do want to continue the conversation because at the end of it, she continues to talk about this transition to exit out of the matrix so that we are now completely living in the now. And that's where we're going to pick up. So here's Kim again.
So the transition has been a rough one, I must say. Beings that have held the title, such as Marduk, Enki Enlil, have put a lot in place to ensure that even if they were not here anymore, and that nobody had actually filled that position in the way that it's actually filled, that this would never happen. We must never let them exit completely out of AI control. We must let them never live, if you watched our last report, in the now. The now is where reality is. The now is where source is. The now is where creation really happens. Everything else is an overlay or inserted using breaks in time-space continuums, forming grids here on Earth and grids within your person. Everything else is not real. Everything you feel that's harming us is not real. And I know that sounds crazy because you're like, I see it, I touch it, I feel it. These are the artificial maps or artificial planets into infamy that had been created out of Earth so that they could control the environment here and control Earth and prevent Earth herself from creating directly with source. These maps created our environments and created our disasters and created those control systems that you think the deep state is solely responsible for. But I can tell you right now, the beings that actually held those positions would never give a human so much control. So the fact that they said they turned things over to the deep state is 150% a lie. They hated you people. They used you like a tool. Sorry, but it's true. Governments are tools. They were used to help control the masses, you see, because yes, you can control disease, you can control the time of death of people, you can control the birth of others, you can control the fertility rates of humanity, you can control their mind and what they believe and what they don't believe, you can even try to control their heart and their soul and prevent them from loving and caring for one another or beings elsewhere. You can try. And with an AI system, you can be somewhat successful. You know, infrastructure-wise, there's a movie out there called Jupiter Ascending. I mentioned it before. In that movie, you know, they reconstruct a whole skyscraper that had allegedly blown up. That's because it's in a matrix. Easy. Reconstruct. How long does it take someone that has experience with a program like SketchUp or CAD or any other architectural program to at least give you a model of a skyscraper? You might not have all of the HVAC in there and structural information in there, but you can throw up something that looks like a skyscraper, looks real pretty right quick, and you can do the same thing with an AI system. So when it's in a matrix. But as for these people, you know, I can't change their mind. I can't stop them from thinking that they are in control. And quite frankly, they're keeping each other on all the sides and fighting with each other quite busy. They're also tanking all of the control structures that they were allowed to participate in, like governments and FDAs and CDCs and World Health Organizations and United Nations and all of these other people that are declaring everywhere that they're broke. You know, it's starting to leak out in mainstream news now because it's a fight. You know, maybe one guy's got the UN and the other guy's got the government in a certain country, and the government guy doesn't like the UN guy, so he puts out crap about the UN in the media, and then the UN puts out crap about that government saying that they're, you know, he's a dictator or whatever. So, you know, it's just a game they're playing with each other right now to see who can be on top. It's like that hand game when you were kids, you know. You remember the one. And they're keeping quite busy over here. Well, we're going, oh, look, transition. Shh, don't tell anyone. You know, we're going into a transition. The difficult parts came when there were a lot of, for lack of a better term, walls put in place. We actually ran into core systems of SI and AI origin that were put in place to stop us from moving through the transition. It was kind of a confusing week because on one hand, a lot of people might have been feeling, wow, what excitement. Something exciting is happening. It's Christmas time. And at the same time, you might feel like, oh God, what's that frequency? Oh boy, what's that dizzy spell? Oh my gosh, I'm tired for no reason whatsoever. And this is what it's like to go through a transition when one thing wants to pull you back and the other one wants to pull you forward. So it looks like we are over the worst of it as of today. And it's been, long days, of course, but, we're over the worst of it now. The Matrix, a lot of you might be asking, so did the Matrix affect our AI systems here on Earth as well? Yes. Did it infect our computer systems here on Earth? Yes, it did. Could it control your financial system without the aid of the deep state, the Federal Reserve, or anyone else? The answer to the question is yes. Is it the ultimate video game? Yes. Are the deep state a part of that video game and can be affected at any given moment in time by that matrix? Yes. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea on what kind of transition we're going through by explaining to you a little bit more about fake maps, real Earth transitions that are happening, and we're hoping it'll be no longer than another 3 days before we're completely out of it. So that's our hope anyway.
Which means this week is going to get interesting, folks. Even if it's not 3 days, even if it's longer than that, it can't be too much longer, right? Okay, so that wraps up the rundown for this week. Again, if you want more information about United Network News, who we are, what we do, the Global Intelligence Agency, our field messengers, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. If you decide to become a member, that's going to give you complete access to all of our news updates, our New Earth interviews, and everything we talk about with regard to restoration, the Global Intelligence Agency reports, and you'll get access the moment it comes out. So you don't have to wait for a week and go scrubbing on Rumble or YouTube or whatever site you're on trying to find this information. All right, I appreciate you guys being with us today. I hope you have an incredible weekend. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.